computers, and this is just like giving me a hard time.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We are live. We have, I think, everybody in play. We have our slide going. Excellent. Welcome, everybody. I am so excited to be here with you all and to be here with a really amazing group of panelists to discuss living income and really be able to think about what we are looking at beyond wages. So my name is Hana Kanashige. I am an educator and technician based out of Dallas, Texas. I have some experience with looking at what baristas are looking for in terms of a living wage or in terms of a more sustainable work environment through conducting a really big survey about a year or so ago through our professional development series where we called it Barista Sustainability and looked at what it means to think of as, you know, what's the sustainability of working in retail longer term. With us today, we have Mike from Oddly Correct, who is a former aerospace engineer and musician turned coffee roaster and business manager. He's been, he learned how to roast coffee with a pretty small company in North Carolina before joining his brother-in-law Gregory Colstow at Oddly Correct in Kansas City. We did hear a lot about him last panel, so we are extremely excited to have him here with us today. He has a lovely wife and 3 daughters and is really excited about pushing past the boundaries of the coffee industry's status quo in areas of employee compensation, company structure, and culture, as well as environmental impact and economies of scale growth. Next up, we have Wind Burlow coming from Denver, and he is a barista and illustrator that has been working for over 10 years in cafes ranging from Colorado to Paris. And during this time, he has struggled and fumbled his way toward building the power of coffee workers and improving the class character of specialty coffee through graphic, spatial, and technology design. But mostly just good old-fashioned coffee. During a rush, yo ho ho, a pirate's life for me is running through a loop in his head. Jamil Bradley is the roaster and co-owner of the Reverse Orangutan based in Glendora, California. He has over 10 years of coffee experience. He's enjoyed the sourcing and profiling of coffees throughout the world and is a fan of new and funky coffee styles. He was actually just telling us a little bit about some of the coffees that he's brought on, and they sound really amazing. I'm a little bit jealous. Maybe someday I will get to taste some, but he enjoys carbonic maceration, anaerobic, and natural coffees. And then Erica Escalante is a Latina mother of 2 and the owner of Cafe Reina, formerly known as the Arrow Coffee House in Portland, Oregon. She established her company in 2013 at the age of 22. Man, which is not, you at 22 and me at 22, you are way more productive. And she has a full food and baking program at her cafe. She's on the board of Glitter Cat Barista, as well as the editorial advisory board for Barista Magazine. He is also the current administrator and coordinator of the Portland Barista Community Group and has been a huge advocate in the industry for honesty, transparency, and empathy among cafe owners. So without further ado, thank you all for being here with us today. And I want to just dive right in. So our very first question is going to be started out with Mike, but we often think about a living wage as really just covering the basics. So food, shelter, essential necessities. But is there anything that you consider to be part of a living or a livable wage that isn't usually taken into consideration? Mike, take it away.
Yeah, thanks. That question kind of like started with us with just examining like where our community was at and where baristas in the Kansas City area, like where they fell as far as income went. We'd heard a lot of things like just anecdotally from there being like a tight-knit community and like everyone sort of sharing their experiences and stuff. but we actually like surveyed a lot of baristas. But I think the thing that like I ended up finding was this calculator that MIT came up with, where they take all this data and compile the basically like cost of living for like housing, childcare, healthcare, um, all these different aspects, and then formulated like a living wage and comparing it to like the minimum wage and all these different things, based upon like a single adult or two adults with one kid, like all the different scenarios. But I'll quote them just so I get it right. But what they said was that this living wage um, provides a very thin line between financial independence of the working poor and the need to seek out public assistance or suffer like consistent and severe housing and food insecurity. So like a living wage, like where that line is drawn, like the terminology sounds really good, but it's actually like a dangerous line between people being able to support themselves and being thrust into like uncertainty about like where they're going to live and like, are they going to eat? So it's really interesting, I guess. Just it was eye-opening for me to see like, oh, like what I thought was like the poverty line, what is actually like, that's what I thought this was, like the living wage that they're describing seems more like what I was making this an assumption about. So that really like spurred me to think forward about like, one, like how can we make sure that like the people we're responsible for are like well above that, and then have opportunities to grow and like as they grow as people and move along like in their lives, whether that means like getting married or having kids or just moving like professionally and like looking for like deeper involvement. How can we like use our resources to make that possible? Yeah. So I think what that looks like for us is like the opportunities for like saving or like taking like vacation, or like not being like a slave to like your like 40-hour week where like you have to be working all the time to make ends meet, or giving access, like we didn't start this way, but like giving access to like affordable healthcare, and now we just provide it for, like we were able to provide it for our employees, which was really cool. So looking at like all the different aspects of it and things that aren't just like, okay, like here's a number, let's just meet that number, it kind of started that way, and then as we dug deeper, realized like, oh, there's a lot more to this, and there are a lot more layers that are necessary to look at.
Thanks so much, Mike. Erica is having a couple technical difficulties, so we will hopefully get her back so soon. But Jamil, I want to jump to you and hear your thoughts on this.
To start, I want to just say thank you to SCA for having me here, and I'm really excited to speak. I think that also, is there a way to turn? I'm just hearing myself feedback. That's throwing me off. Anywho, I think that when it comes to talk about the minimum wage and like living wages, I think we have to look at this in a very holistic manner. America is the most unequal that it's ever been. If you look at like the Gini coefficient compared to us and other industrialized nations, oh, that's throwing me off.
We don't hear the feedback, so it's you're good. I think you're only hearing it from yourself.
I'm probably just hearing myself.
Okay. Keep it going. We're good.
We're the most unequal that we've ever been. When you think about what it takes for a person to live by themselves, based on like what most financial analysts will tell them to, the average person needs to be making around $4,200 a month. So if they were a single household, they would probably need to make around $26 as an hourly wage for them to be able to live in a one-bedroom apartment, seeing that the average rate for a home right now, or like for a one-bedroom apartment, is at $1,400. The fight for 15 doesn't get us there. the amount of economic inequality that we have in this nation is stifling coffee growth. It stifles us being able, as coffee roasters, as people who want to sell coffee to other people, for us to be able to have a sustainable program for people. Because if you're fighting to make ends meet, if you're fighting for your paycheck, buying a cup of coffee that has all of the things that I think the Specialty Coffee Association and coffee shops like ourselves have, of coffee that's over $2 a pound, being able to provide benefits and trying to do things that are more equitable for our community, it's hard when you have people who aren't making ends meet. I think that when we think about what we do as an industry and how we treat our employees, it is about wages, it's about benefits, it's about how we can get a more equitable society, but it's also about us as consumers ourselves, remembering that people who are coming to support specialty coffee support us for those things, and that we need to make sure that we put our dollars to good use as well. Because oftentimes, and I had a really extensive conversation with one of my employees about this, you know, where our level of capitalism right now is, it's hard for people to make decisions that don't end up having repercussions downstream. If we're buying McDonald's burgers where they're not going to raise the minimum wage, we're putting money into a system that's not going to go and reinvigorate the economy back. We have to be, as consumers and as owners, we have to look at what we're doing and how our money is being reinvested into our communities.
Thanks so much. Those are some really great points, and I think we're going to come back to them a little bit later. Wynn, what are your thoughts on what a living or livable wage is going to be looking like?
My thoughts. Well, first of all, I just want to say, just give some recognition to all the people that are tuning in, because I think it's really cool that people are participating in this. I know that I haven't in the past, so I guess I appreciate people like wanting to have these conversations and going out of their way to do it, especially now when there aren't like a big like flashy event to go to. And I mean, my thoughts are not very different from Jamil's or from Mike's. As Jamil said, or as he alluded to rather, if the minimum wage had kept up with productivity since the 60s, it'd be well over $20 an hour now. So yeah, obviously the way this the society that we're living in is structured to accumulate wealth at the top, and we've seen that. Obviously this pandemic has showed us that it couldn't be more obvious to us now. Even if we already knew it or something, now it's completely impossible to ignore. And the thing that I want to call attention to, from my personal view, is thinking about, as Jamil says, about kind of our global interaction with a capitalist economy that is structured in this way to accumulate wealth for developed countries and for countries of the global north at the expense of countries of the global south, producing countries and countries that export their labor, like in the form of migrant workers or something like that. So I want to think about that, but I also do want to think about our local economies and how we interact with the communities that we actually serve for the most part. And again, we can see how stark the wealth inequality is in our local communities more than anything right now. So for instance, in Denver, the median house price just went over $500,000 for, that's the median too. So that's crazy. And people have never been more insecure in terms of their income than they are right now in Denver. And at the same time, the housing prices are as high as possible, or as high as they have ever been. But, we know that capitalism, when it comes to real estate, will always seek to maximize the value of that real estate. So it shouldn't be a surprise to us. And the thing that I want to use to connect these two different things, this really radically local view and also this kind of global anti-imperial view, is that at the bottom of all of this, there's this huge class, the vast majority of all the people on Earth are kind of in a similar position as workers who create value that then gets taken away from them in the form of profits and go to people that own large companies and small companies as well.
Yeah, can I chime in on that?
Yeah, please do.
When we started having these conversations, I had this visual of an upside down pyramid, where the people, basically this idea that all the authority and resources are accumulated at the top, for, in particular, like this is like just how I perceive like it happening a lot within our industry, where it's like there are very few people and very few like available spots, you know, like in these like top management or like ownership type positions where there's lots of resources. And then you have lots of people down at the bottom of this pyramid where there are like very few resources. Yeah, like you said, who are providing value like up the chain. But we don't value the work that's being done, creating that value that goes then like up the chain to like create, you know, profit or just additional resources for those like higher up. So like I started thinking like, well, how do we like turn it into just a rectangle? Like how do we give resources to people who are in the position to like create, you know, like we're businesses, like to create profit that will benefit like everyone up and down the chain, you know? So thinking in like a standard of living, like egalitarian mindset, you know, rather than thinking like, well, okay, because like, you know, this is the owner or like you're the, you know, you're the manager or like the supervisor that like you deserve this much better of a standard. Like you get these types of perks and like because you know like because if you're the owner of the company you should be like driving a car that's this nice or whatever, whereas like okay, well, like let's all just like have the same standard of living and figure out what that means for someone who's working for us who is like a student or someone who's working for us who, you know, is married and has a kid, or like someone who's like the sole income provider for the family. But like what does it look like to provide something that's like the same standard of living and like equal resources for everyone who's there? And I'm not saying that we're like they're able to do that completely yet, but like that's like the vision for, I think, valuing the work that's being done no matter like where someone is in like an organization.
Totally. It's one of those big things where, you know, that's kind of the target point, right, of being able to provide that. When brought up a kind of interesting point about, you know, where we are talking about, you know, seeing really kind of crazy, you know, financial situations for a lot of people, where we have wild housing markets, we have, you know, the most income instability that, you know, we probably have had ever in our lives at this current point. And Amethyst recently moved into a tip-free model. And so a question directed to you, Wynn, is going to be, and then for all of you, does moving to a tip-free or a higher price point model really create a barrier for entry into our spaces? And how do we address that?
Yeah, I mean, this is always, you know, there's no easy way to fix huge structural problems, and the issue with tipping and how we've thought about it for a number of years, you know, I'd say that we've always been afraid of going tip-free precisely for this problem, also for the problem of basically having a business model that's sort of confrontational of people's expectations, of consumers' expectations, of guests' expectations. And I mean, for us, what it really came down to was just having to make a very serious moral and practical decision during this crisis, basically. And we decided if we're going to be open at all, we need to do it like the best way we know how. And this was the obvious thing to do for us because it's something we had already been kind of struggling with. And we just felt that and still do feel that tipping is a form of wage suppression. Absolutely, 100% is. And it's not something that we can support, either as like sort of what's become as like sort of a culture of reinforcing class boundaries, right? Because tipping has always been a classist practice. It's always the upper classes condescending to the lower classes by tipping, and this issue with like increasing the prices in order to compensate for that, to make our our standard of living and our wages match the value that we create with our work, is just like, I think, something that we have to do, and I think something that everyone has to do. And yeah, I mean, to me, it just seems like an absolutely necessary thing. Like, what tipping does is it denies that work has value, and work absolutely is value. It's not just that work has value, and we need to like say that it has more value than it has currently. We just have to acknowledge that work is itself value, that we create with our work value, and that certain classes and certain types of people capture that value from us and they don't redistribute it. So, except in a condescending way, like in the form of tipping, right? So that's just something that we had to contend with, and we made this decision. And so far, I think, it's working out more or less. And so now that I've got that out of the way, the issue with creating a barrier to entry for other classes that are even below our own is, I think the really serious question, and the one that is the most difficult to answer, mostly because I think that what I've just said about stating work as value and saying that work is value, I think that helps everybody as long as we prove that it's true, right? But it's true that there are certain people that can't afford our prices, and I wouldn't expect them to, right? And it's also true that coffee isn't necessary and that coffee is sort of an indulgent thing. But I don't think that people shouldn't be able to afford it. And basically, I think that our calculation is just more of like a long-term thing, because we've been able to, by ourselves, reinvest in how we spend our money, or how we actually invest in our communities. And we have the ability to do that now. And we also have a set of values that we all agree with as workers in the company. Because I also want to just mention that this wasn't a decision that the owners made. It was a decision that everybody made together. I don't know. Yeah, it is complicated, and I do realize that we all live in this sort of weird contradiction, right? Of trying to improve the lives of everyone, but also improve our lives so that we have the time to do that too. It's just that's just where we're at, basically.
Find my microphone here. Welcome back, Erica. We are so excited to see you. I know several of you have considered what a tip-free model would look like. And could you guys describe a bit about why you maybe would or did not go in that direction? I'm going to start with you, Mike.
I think it was something. It was this basically it was the start of our conversation as a company, where I just sort of said one day to everybody, what do you guys think about going with a tip-free thing, And I think we all sort of felt the tension that that Wynn described, which was we weren't sure if our community was ready for that, but through some of the stories that we had heard about, so a lot of servers get a tipped wage, which is it's something ridiculously low, $2.37 or something like that, right? And then you're expected to be able to make beyond minimum wage with your tips. What we had heard was horror stories of employers basically using tips to then garnish their wages, so that with tips they were only making minimum wage. So it's if they were making $6, in Kansas City, I think the minimum wage is $8.60 an hour. So if they were making $6.60 an hour or something like that, or let's say $5.60 an hour, they would pay them $3 an hour for that week or whatever, which is crazy. But anyway, what we decided was I kind of thought about it in the sense of public radio. It's not all of us donate to public radio, but we all get the benefit of that service from the people who can afford to give in that way. So what if we said, okay, we're going to use tips as a bolster to a guaranteed wage, so it's this is the minimum you'll ever get, working at Oddly is $18 an hour. But then any tips that come beyond that are yours to keep, So we said it's almost we were really vocal with our customers about the the reliance of the barista community on tips as part of their income. And I think that was eye-opening for a lot of the customers. So what we actually saw was that we got more tips to our employees as things went on. And it is like some people can pay more and some people can pay less. So it's almost like a little bit of like a sliding pay scale in a sense, but it's like it's a much more voluntary, thing. So what we've seen is that our community it didn't seem so much like a way for wages to be suppressed, but like opportunities for people to really show that they thought our people had value. And like, it was really encouraging to see that was the case, that they like agreed with us on that.
100%. And Erica, let's hear from you on this. We had a pretty extensive conversation where you were telling me about some of that wage floor almost. So let's hear from you.
Yeah. Hi. It's great to be here. I'm sorry I'm having problems with the system, but so I'm in Portland, Oregon, and we actually have a rising minimum wage every year. So I think this year it's $13.25. And so at Arrow, we did talk about possibly not accepting tips. And we've seen other restaurants and cafes go through that here in town, and they actually always end up back at accepting tips because it's better for the workers or the wages or whatever. And so we actually also guarantee a tip amount. So we say like, guarantee, I pay everyone a certain amount that's over minimum wage, and then I guarantee a certain amount in tips every pay period. So we also guarantee, and then anything extra they get to keep for themselves. So it has worked really great for us. It has cost me money, especially during COVID, where it's really, the tips have not been consistent. Business is very, very inconsistent right now. And so I do sacrifice a little bit to make sure I guarantee that wage. But I think it's worth it. And I think my employees have really good feedback about it.
And Jamil?
So we do allow tipping at our cafe. We pay above minimum wage for the state of California. Tipping is antiquated. Tipping is very, very antiquated. It is. I agree with Wynn that it is based on wage suppression. I also, unfortunately, juxtapose that with there is a culture of tipping that America has right now, good, bad, or indifferent. So we do our best to pay our employees a competitive wage for the area, but at the same time, while tipping is still the norm as you go out to every other restaurant, I'm going to go to restaurants that allow tipping, and I will tip those people as well. As an owner, manager, operator of my cafe, I don't take tips. So sometimes it's me and one employee working for the shift, and my employee gets 100% of the tips that are made that day. I think that when it comes to tipping, I think that oftentimes, I haven't seen it in many coffee shops. I also don't ask people about all their financials. That restaurants will go and tip people that $2 an hour wage, provided that they're a tipped employee. And I haven't seen that too much in the coffee industry to the coffee industry's benefit. And I think that's a distinction that should be brought up, is that a lot of this wage suppression has been in the service industry, and it's been how we treat food service workers who back in the day were primarily Black and Latino, and how this was a form of racial economic oppression. I've worked in the coffee industry for 10 years, and I've been tipped at all of them, and I've also been paid at the California minimum wage the entire time. So like, while I understand that there's a lot of problematic parts of tipping, I don't feel like a lot of people realize the tipping system is built the way it's been built. So I think it's a step for progress that cafes need to make, and I think that it's a good thing when cafes are ready to make that step. I also think that for budding coffee shops and younger businesses that are coming through, tips are a way that allow them to be competitive, because they are fighting against not just like their competitive coffee shop, but they are fighting against the overall economy still. So tipping is a tool that allows baristas to have some sort of wage stability, to have some sort of money coming in. And I support tipping in the interim. I would like to be in a situation where tipping was phased out in all of the service industry and that we didn't need people to be tipped at all.
Someday, I hope we'll all get there eventually. A question I want to direct first to Erica is, we think a lot about how we are operating as businesses and then how we are kind of working with our employees, but how can we empower employees to be able to make really smart budgeting choices and understand the value of their work?
Yeah, this is a great question that I think about all the time because honestly, my background in even owning a business is not from a place of a lot of privilege. So, when I opened at 22, it was an amazing opportunity, but I had no money, like no money. We were living off nothing. And I remember like not being able to afford food and just eating the day old bagels kind of thing. Like it was a struggle. And I was raised from that. I was raised from a family in poverty. And so for me, like capitalism, I hate it. And I think a lot of y'all would agree with me that it's a terrible system that we're in. It's almost more like corporatism where, it's just, I hate that system, but at the same time, I'm here, like I'm a part of it. And so like, what do you do in that situation when you end up being a part of this system that is unfair and it's really, really hard? And, you can't really budget your way out of poverty. And so I don't want to say like, oh, just work hard and save your money and you'll be fine. That's not what I'm saying. And so this question is hard to answer, but at the same time, I do question sometimes if we are truly challenging ourselves to really empower ourselves with knowledge and with some discipline in order to play this game well together, right? So like the money that I have, even now that I'm trying to work and trying to build a life for me, my family, and provide for my kids, sometimes I realize that, you know what, I don't understand this X, Y, or Z, budgeting, investing, saving, how to pay off debt. I could just Google it. And I can go on TikTok and I can watch all these videos of people trying to give you information on how to empower yourself and get that information. So I say this as a part of the community also, that sometimes I see, I wish capitalism would just go away, but at the same time, we're here. So I'm like, we should all be working together to do this well. And so I really love to empower my employees by giving them the information that I can. I am super transparent about all of our finances. I try to provide as much information as possible, and try to empower them with knowledge and wisdom. Because if I were to just sit back and be like, oh, I hate this, it's unfair, and just complain, I feel like I wouldn't have been able to do the things I've been able to do. And as an able-bodied person, I want to work and create as much as I can so that I can be a contributor to the community around me and to share and to take care and to do that mutual aid also. So I hope that makes sense. I'm still working out these thoughts every day. I'm still trying to challenge myself every day of like, what do we do? Because our government is failing us miserably in a lot of these areas, right? Like healthcare should be provided, and it's really hard. And so it's just, we have to decide to fight for change. We have to also empower ourselves with the knowledge that's available.
Thanks so much for that answer. The question that I want to direct to all of you guys before we move into some of the Q&A, and starting with Jamil, is how do we approach really acting as an ethical business, caring for employees, empowering them without having that additional financial backing? We're not coming from a multi-million-dollar business. We're not our kind of coffee industry is not one where we're in it for the money. We're in it because we love the work, we love the people, we love the product, we love service. And how can we start and how can we continue to go about acting in ways that allow us to care for our employees and demonstrate that level of transparency that Erica's talking about.
2 words for me: transparency and equity. You have to be able to show what you're doing. And I think in showing how you are being equitable by your team, you prove it by being transparent. I actually have like a whole set of notes. And, if we look at where we were years ago in like the 1960s, your average boss was taking 20 times what their median employee was now. And now we're moving to a point where we have sometimes over 300 to 1 ratios of like where your employee is to your employer. And you have to put your money where your mouth is and show people, hey, like I am not going to say that I'm 200 times the person that you are inside of this work environment. I'm going to say that our wages are equitable. And, unfortunately, people are going to, there's economic inequality. There's economic inequality in the system, and everybody who is a business shop owner has to reconcile with the fact that no choice that they make is without a consequence about economic inequality. We can try our best to mitigate damage, but no matter what, as Erica said about the system of capitalism that we're at right now, there's always going to be winners and losers at this system, and it's unfortunate. It's not what I think any of us walk in here thinking like, oh, I'm going to do this and like I'm going to take all this money from people. I don't think that's what people believe, but I think that if you want to show that we are trying to be better for our employees, for our team, for our community, I think that it starts with a level of transparency about our books. And I think that it starts with a level of equity and showing that owners, managers are in the same boat as their employees are, and that employers are on the ground floor doing the same things that their employees are. I still get on my hands and knees and scrub dishes and drains. Like, I'm not above any of you guys like this, or I'm here with you in the trenches, making coffee, doing something that I'm passionate about. And I will happily show anybody what we're doing and let them know, like, this is why we think that we're doing the right thing in the environment that we're living in. I agree with what you said, Kendra. We can't act like financial transparency is something that people can't handle. You have to be able to show somebody what's going on. Because if you can show people how we're operating as a business, then conversations about wages, because we do need to have rising wages for employees. But if you can show somebody, hey, we can't afford this, we're trying to save up to get upgrades on equipment, we need to buy a new espresso machine, our water filtration system isn't working, things that we can do to show that we are not only buying ethically, that we're also improving our business, to grow our business, to help our employees, because more business means better wages. So, and if you're struggling and your employees are asking for more, that you can justify, hey, this is tough right now. And, once we get back on our feet, we can sit there and put it back into wages, because there's dignity in their work. And we have to show them that there's dignity. And there's no dignity with your employees if you're dishonest with them.
100%. Mike, to you?
Yeah, I think something that I really appreciated about Jamil and like Reverse Orangutan was that like in their like, description of themselves, they're saying like they're scrappy, but like striving towards like real gourmet shit, right? So it's like this
serious like, gourmet shit.
Yeah. No, like I totally resonate with that, because like we started as like one dude in a garage, and not like this. We're not selling this story of like, oh, American dream, like building a big company from like the ground up. Like, no, like we had to figure out how to like get by for ourselves, So it's like, like our walls are just like plywood and stuff. Like we don't have like, we weren't throwing around tons of money to open a shop, So we were like scrapping it together just so we could like support our own families. And then it's like, okay, we can like hire somebody. And, expanding as we succeed and like going slow and like slow measured growth, rather than like coming in with presuppositions of, okay, like this is what like a specialty coffee company has to look like. We have to spend this much money on the build out. We have to have like over the top. I got kind of attacked by like another company here in town when we like publicized like what we were going to pay our employees. They were mad because like their employees were sort of saying like, whoa, what's with this? Like, why can't you guys pay us this? And my reaction, he's like saying like, hey, like you guys are making us look bad. And I was like, no, like you did that when you spent like millions of dollars to put a, 1940s airplane on top of your building.
That part.
Like, and it's like, okay, like I love the way I live, by the way, but like I'm driving a 1996 Chevy Blazer, which I love, but like I bought it because it was cheap, because like I don't think I deserve to be like driving a better ride than like my employees, you know, like I don't think I deserve like that, like that an egalitarian mindset, you know, where it's like we don't deserve more just because it was our idea, or like and I think there was some Q&A going on, but Wynn answered like how do you justify like paying a barista like high wages, where it's like it's not like what you're doing, or like necessarily, yeah, it doesn't matter what you're doing, it's the fact that you're doing work and like you're here that's valuable. And if we think that it's valuable, then we should be like compensating it that way. But it takes sacrifice in other areas. It takes being scrappy. It takes, you know, like, yeah, like saving up slowly for like your espresso machine, or the one that you want, and buying a used one instead, you know, and like getting by when it like breaks down or whatever. Like that was us for a super long time, you know, and we're just now getting to the spot where it's like, oh, like we're like in a financially healthy position where we're like saving up for new equipment and stuff like that. And it's been fueled by success brought in by people who care about the stuff that we're like moving towards. I think that's like what I want to like shake people who are like running coffee companies that are spending so much money on the other stuff, and say like, no, like this is what people care about this, you know, and they're wising up to it, you know. Yeah, sorry, that stuff makes me hot.
I mean,
It's
Instagram.
so true.
Instagram, though, you have to get those Instagram likes. If you don't have like the perfect
You
Art
do.
Deco
Likes the
aesthetic,
money.
yeah, like, oh, you're not at 10K likes, man. I mean, I think that's a lot of why people do that. It's a lot of the projection of like what this industry is supposed to seem like to a lot of folks.
Exactly.
And I think that comes into like the price of what people expect for a cup of coffee. And there's coffee shops in my community that I know the farms that they're getting coffee from, and I know like the books that they're getting them from, and I know how much more they're putting on that coffee compared to what I'm selling that coffee for. But their facility looks so much better than the pop-up shop that I have that's inside of a movie theater right now, or my other cafe that's inside of a shared work facility. Like I'm in like it's in union co-work, but it's like a WeWork pretty much. You know, that I think that projection of like what it is, and people add that premium to it. And I think we had a conversation previously. I think that Win made a really good point about that's kind of like a price barrier that also becomes a class barrier, which also turns into a race barrier about like who we allow to come into this coffee world that we have. You know, I know the next panel is going to be about having African Americans and like the Black coffee community, and like how do you justify when we have this system, this capitalistic system that's already doing so much to oppress people's wages? How do you get them to come through and realize, hey man, you can't be buying all of this coffee that's at the sea market price from Dunkin' Donuts. I don't know if Dunkin' Donuts does that, but you know the point that I mean. And then expect them to come into a specialty coffee shop like ours, and that cup of coffee, just for like a regular black cup of coffee, being 2 to 3 times more than what they're going to spend. And then because we are so unequal already, then you're already going to play music. You're going to have an aesthetic that's going to push away certain people because they can't afford it. Why play a Jay Dilla record? No one who's going to come into my coffee shop likes Jay Dilla. Coffee people love lo-fi stuff, but
That's their problem.
yeah, we've set up this system that already kind of, we've hyper-picked who our consumer is. And when we're trying to open that up, how can we do that? We can have baristas continue to make more money, but then baristas, if they're not going to consume better, they're going to purchase from people that aren't treating their employees well. And then we end up being the wonderful baristas that drink natural wines and have slow aged cheeses, and everyone else that we have, our friends in our community. You know, some of my best friends live in San Bernardino, and if they came to like the coffee shops and the restaurants that I normally eat at, they'd be like, oh, you like all that fancy food? Like that's literally what they say. And I don't think that it's fancy food. I think that farm to table restaurants and equitable wages should be the future. You know, we as a society don't treat our farm workers, our agricultural workers in a way that makes any sense. And then we expect these people, I mean, it's even true for the farmers. The farmers very rarely get to try the coffee that they are spending their lives working on. They don't get to enjoy this product. It comes out to the Western world, it comes into industrialized nations, and they get to enjoy it. You know, I think that and that's why I think that wage equity between bosses and owners and having that conversation really starts the drive about how, and I appreciate the hell out of the fact that you posted your wages up, because when other people notice it, it forces other people to remember that you're doing something right. And I think that that's what we have to do. We have to challenge our competitors in the industry, and I think that we need to galvanize people in other industries similar to ours to be more transparent and more equitable themselves.
And I think too, to the point earlier, like it takes some early adopters in certain communities where it's possible, like when at Amethyst, where like you guys kind of seize the moment that you realize like, oh, we can take on a tip-free model and it's going to work, or at least you believed it would, you know. But like it takes those early adopters then showing that no, this works, and like creating, you know, opportunities for other places to do the same, where we can actually change the culture.
And yeah, I mean, yeah, cool. I did want to say, I know Erica's not with us anymore, which sucks because I really wanted to say that earlier.
She's here.
Oh, you are? Okay,
I'm
cool.
here
I just
by
can't see you.
audio. I just can't.
Okay,
You
got it,
just
cool.
can't see me.
Yeah, all right. Well, I just wanted to say I really liked your answer, because I think what you're getting at is that, like, you know, from my, like, again, maybe I didn't state this like specifically, but I'm the only person in this panel that doesn't own a coffee shop. I'm actually just a barista. So like I always have appreciated owners like Elle and like Erica and Jamil and Mike. Like when I came into Amethyst at first, I thought it was deliberately super minimal, like had like this crazy like nothing Nordic style, but it was just literally that Elle didn't have any money, so we didn't even have chairs. Like she just ran out of money. So like but again, like the way that I experienced that initial shock was that, oh, this is like something totally different, you know. This is not like a comfortable place, and they don't even have chairs, right? So, like, but I to get back to Eric, sorry, I got kind of distracted by that. Like, having a worker-focused business is not only important, but also absolutely necessary, because whether or not you want to admit it, if you're not participating actively with your workers and listening to them and talking to them and making them a part of the business and giving them access to the value that they create with their work and access to like how the company runs and how it functions, you're just going to end up getting them organized against you ultimately. And like, which I think is necessary and important too for shops that refuse to engage with the people that work for them. But even us, even though we had this worker-focused model, we even still had issues with employees like sort of organizing against me, just because I was one of the older employees and the ownership. So, and even though we're a small shop, and we saw it just this last week in Colorado Springs, this huge like union activity at this place called the Wild Goose, and the owners did the absolute worst thing they could do, which is fire a ton of people immediately. And so, like, you know, that's like that's the thing that you have to be prepared for if you're not going to do the actual work and to, like, you know, like Jamil said, like scrub the drains basically, like both metaphorically and literally. And so, you know, I think that's important to acknowledge that if you don't do this type of work, if you don't engage with your workers and with the communities that they serve and the different classes in your neighborhood, whether that be through like hiring or through having some kind of policy where you can address the different income levels in your neighborhood, like you're going to end up in a bad situation where the workers are going to organize against you, because ultimately the workers are the ones that create the value. And once they realize that, once they know that, which is something that, you know, we're working to do to spread that message, right? But once they realize that, like they're going to organize against people that are keeping them where they are in society, and that goes generally, right? Like for like where we're at in America, but yeah.
100%. We're going to jump to answer a couple of the questions that have come up in our chat box, and we've got several of our participants here will be on the coffee break session next week. This one will be 10 a.m. Pacific time on the 13th of October. So definitely come and see everyone again. But I'm hoping we can get through 2 questions at least. The first one is an easy one. So I'm going to start with Erica. How do you approach wage transparency at your establishment?
Yeah, so I have a pretty small team right now. There's 5 people and then me and then my partner helps. So it's very small. Everyone gets paid the same thing. So everyone is contributing to do the same work. And we definitely have a more just like helpful team. You know, everyone is doing the dishes, everyone is pulling their weight. And so everyone gets the same amount of money per hour. And then I guarantee a certain amount of per hour tip amount. So I guarantee $7 an hour per tip. And every single pay period, I send out how much we collected total in tips, how many total hours there were, and how much everyone made per hour. And everyone gets to see that information every pay period. If your boss is not doing that, you need to ask them for that information because they have to calculate it no matter what. And so if they're not sending it to you, I feel like that's a problem because they have that information. And you should be empowered to get that information and to know how much you're making per hour. I can't even tell you how many baristas I ask, how much do you make per hour in tips? And they don't know. When that's a big chunk, $7 per hour, I mean, I've definitely had tips that are higher than that. Like sometimes we get up to $9 or $10 an hour, but you should definitely know the money that you're making, and you should be knowing that your boss is doing the math correctly, because I'm human and I know I mess up the numbers sometimes, but if you don't know the hours that you work and how much money you're making, then you're missing out. And that's what I'm talking about being empowered with wisdom and knowledge and being on top of your, ish. So, so that's how we handle tips and wages at my shop. And so everyone is making at least $21 an hour. And I feel like I feel comfortable with that. I wish I could pay everyone $1 million an hour, but that's how we handle wages.
And Jamil, I saw you put a little in our chat box, but the verbal answer.
So for wage transparency for our business, starting in 2021, this year we've been able to have a good amount of success. So, at March of this year, I had 1 employee, and now I am at 7 employees. So we've definitely grown actually even through COVID. So starting in 2021, we're going to have wage transparency. We're going to publish, I will be publishing my taxes and letting people see how much I'm making, so my employees can actually see how much they're making. When it comes to tipping, I think that's actually really great what you're doing. I think the difficulty is it's, sometimes tips are weird some days, and especially we do get a decent amount of cash tips for baristas. So I've not everything's always going to be electronic. So if somebody throws in a 21 day, somebody's getting a lot of extra tips that one day. So, in regards to like the tipping aspect of it, I'm a little different, but we are going to be much more transparent. We also provide benefits to our employees at our cafe. So, we pay above minimum wage. And on top of that, we will soon be having benefits. They haven't locked in yet. We just actually finished signing all of our paperwork. So it's going to be rolled out to our baristas soon.
Mike?
Yeah, I'm guessing the question really is how do we handle like tipping and wages? I'm a little unclear. I feel like we've answered a couple different questions.
How the main question here is how do you approach wage transparency?
Okay. I mean, that's something actually that I think we haven't really touched on as a company, more so just because for the longest time it was so few of us, and it's been important to us to get people up, but I agree with Jamil that it's an important step, and I guess I feel convicted to move towards that, to show that hey, this is where everybody's at. I think there's some tension for me. It was are my baristas comfortable sharing their income with everybody else, but we're such a small team where I feel that's an easy conversation to have and to work out. Like, yeah, like if you agree to share your wages, then like that's up to you, you know. I can't really think of reasons why people wouldn't want to, because like we're not like holding any one person up like way above another person or anything. So yeah, I think it's like another step towards like putting pressure on ownership and like, and even like putting pressure on other companies, like we said, to like show like, hey, like it's out here, like, you know, what do you do with it, you know?
Wynn, how about at Amazon?
Yeah, I could be brief on that. We're really tiny right now. We literally only have 6 employees, and we just talk. I mean, 6 employees, including the 2 owners, and everybody's on the same salary right now. So we just talk to each other. That's the answer.
Then the other question I wanted to hit really quick to our cafe or to our business owners, coming from Joanna Hart. How long did it take you guys to be able to pay yourself wages? She wants to bump up her staff, but has not been able to take any pay herself in 2.5 years of being open. And obviously with COVID, debt is easy to rack up. So any tips on how to get to the next space of shifting wages to be more fair, whether money is coming in or not? Jamil, let's start with you.
So I did read that question. I guess the question I would ask is a little bit of extra clarity. I mean, you are making something to keep the lights and roof over your head. I mean, are you talking about pulling profits out of your business? Because I have yet to do that. If we're talking about me making some money that is keeping the lights on and me paying for groceries, once we opened up our cafe for 7 days a week, you know, for our business specifically, we were selling coffee. We started off doing wholesale. So we were toll roasting and selling coffee wholesale to people. During that first, which is about a year of our business, I made nothing. And then I started to take a wage probably 4 or 5 months in when I became fully self-employed. To that point again, though, like I said, I have not made a profit from like what the business has made. Everything's either been reinvested into the business or it's going to like employee wages. But I make money so I don't become homeless. So I hope that you're able to get over that hump. I know it's difficult. I mean, there's lots and lots of hours that you're going to spend toiling and doing a lot. So I'm with you in the struggle for that.
Mike?
Yeah, I think if she is describing, Joanna, if you're describing like literally like you're not getting paid from your business, right? Like not even taking money to like pay your bills and stuff. And then, you know, working another job, or like you have a spouse who's working a job and like, you know, you're running the business, something like that. Like that's a tough spot to be in and to get to. I mean, our approach was so ground up that like there was never, we just had to turn a profit to survive, because it was one person, and then it was 2 people, and it was 3 people. And every time there was a new person, it's like, okay, like we got to continue to be, you know, making money so that we can pay these 4 people, you know? And it's just gone that way until being 10 people. So it's, a lot of it has been like to expand on the basis of success and like not take on like more than what you should, or like, you know, to start small and like work from there. I think that an important step for you, if you are in that spot, could be to be really vocal with your community about the fact that like you're sacrificing your own like income so that your employees have a paycheck. Like if you like explain that and like are really vocal about that to your community, they're going to get behind you and support that. There's plenty of people who care enough about it to where they're going to say, oh, like Joanna's shop is the kind of shop that I want to spend my money at. And I think that like that type of transparency and openness and saying like, it's important enough to me to pay our employees well that I'm not going to get paid. That will create the pathway to actually like, you can take on the business full time and be paid from it. Like, or, you know, that I think like Jamil said, like, I don't think any of us who are like approaching it this way are really that concerned with profit, other than we want like our business to keep running. we want to roll all the money back into building something great and making sure that it's done in like an equitable way. Yeah, so I'd say be really honest and like forthcoming with like your situation and like where you're at and like the sacrifice you're making.
That community support is so important. Erica, can you give us a really, really quick answer on this question?
Yes. Please let me address this. Okay, listen, I have been where you are, and you need to hit me up on Instagram, because let me tell all of you that people who have money, like people who really have money, they have like 5 to 7 different revenue streams. Okay, so my coffee shop doesn't pay me really anything. I do, and I am there right now 70 hours a week. I'm there Sunday through Saturday from before open to close. So I definitely, like, I love the questions about owner transparency and what they're making, because people should know what they're making. And I tell my employees all the time. But I will say that my coffee shop opens up more opportunities for different revenue streams that provide income in a different way. There were many years where I did not get paid anything, not even to pay my bills. And luckily I'm married to a man who has a job. So we literally live off of barely anything. We moved out of Portland into a suburb so that we could afford a smaller amount of rent, and like we are very frugal, and so that is not unusual. And I feel like sometimes people think that we're just making money because we own a coffee shop, and that's not always the case. But I will say that coffee shops provide other revenue streams. So if you are really struggling, just please hit me up on Instagram so we can talk about that, and I can give you the things that helped me get through all of those ups and downs of that.
Thank you all so much thank you for that very quick answer. Erica is a really, really great resource on Instagram. I think you can find everybody's Instagrams or contact from the event page, I hope. But if not, maybe we can get that on there. Thank you all so much for being a part of this panel. I know we're running into a little bit of a time crunch here, and it has been really, really great to have all 4 of you with us. And we just wanted to send over a little reminder that this is going to be a little break right now. So we'll be getting the next session started in 8 minutes. So make sure you are part of that. And then we will be very excited for our happy hour coming up after the event at 4:30 Pacific time. I'm having a hard time with time zones. But as soon as the event ends, we will be over there in that particular Zoom room. And if you have further questions, because I know we had a few more that really did not have a chance to be addressed right now, but come to that coffee break session next week on the 13th at 10 a.m. And we will really look forward to continuing this conversation. Again, thank you to all of our panelists. It was really special to have you as part of this first virtual Bloom experience. It's been so great. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.